You should be getting a notice that this is being recorded now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll share my screen. All right, so good afternoon and welcome everyone. If you have not met me so far, my name is Neela White. I'm a project director at AAAS. I work with Dr. Iris Wagstaff, who many of you may have met or have seen her name attached with the ERN Conference. She serves as the PI. I serve as co-PI for the Emerging Researchers National Conference. And I'd like to welcome you to this webinar on preparing an ERN abstract. I just want to give a quick introduction before I go ahead and push it off to our presenter. I just want to give a little bit of a background about AAAS, share a little bit about the program, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. So as you know, the ERN Conference is hosted by the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS. We are a nonprofit organization and are the largest scientific science organization in the world with about 200,000 members globally. We are best known for our science family of journals, very specifically Science Magazine, but we also do a host of other things, including providing programming from anywhere between K through 12 to higher education and beyond. The mission for AAAS is to advance science, engineering, and innovation throughout the world for the benefit of all people. The ERN Conference is housed within the IC department, which focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of the programs that we have include Entry Point, which is a program for students with disabilities. We have Sea Change, which is looking to ensure that there is diversity and that we're accounting for representation in higher education. The AAAS IFTHN ambassadors, who you may have heard about, who are amazing women who are looking to broaden participation in STEM and really focus on ensuring that we're getting underrepresented minorities, women involved in STEM. The L'Oreal USA Fellowships for Women in Science, which is 5 early career scientists who were selected by L'Oreal, the makeup group, to represent STEM. And then if you may have heard of my name, it has been attached to one of the programs that I also serve as a PI on, co-PI on, which is the AAAS HBCU Making and Innovation Showcase, an initiative where we highlight HBCU student innovators, inventors, entrepreneurs, and makers who focus on developing hardware and software prototypes and app-based solutions to one of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. If you want to learn more information about AAAS, you can visit us on our website, aaas.org. And if you're looking to go into a scientific career, visit our Science Careers website that you see here. So you're here to discuss the preparing an abstract for the Emerging Researchers National Conference in STEM, also known as the ERN Conference. The goals and objectives is preparing a diverse cadre of students preparing a diverse cadre of students for global careers in STEM, to hone their science communication skills. And what we offer during these 3 days that students are at the ERN Conference is undergraduate and graduate STEM research posters, professional development workshops, educational and career fairs, and plenaries with STEM luminaries. The conference this year will be held for the first time since 2020, so we're very excited to have everybody join us in person in Washington, D.C., February 9th through 11th. And as you know, we are talking about preparing the abstracts today. So to submit an oral or poster abstract by September 16th, visit the website that you see below. Please, please, please try to get those in at the deadline. We will not accept any beyond that deadline. Just want to shout out our AAAS ERN project team that I'm a part of. As I've mentioned, Dr. Iris Wagstaff is the STEM program director and is the NSF PI on this project. I am Neela White, as mentioned before, co-PI and project director in the IC unit. I'm joined by Allison Gonzalez, who is our Senior Program Associate on the team. Claire Malloy, who is just, her name is misspelled on here. Apologies, Claire. Claire just joined us last week. We are very excited to have her, and she's serving as a Program Associate for this project. Also on this project is Janice Lim, who is our Events Operations Manager, and Gabby Haynes, our External Evaluator. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because no one wants to hear from me. We want to hear from Dr. Marianne Leong, who will be sharing and talking about the best practices for submitting an ERN abstract. So Marianne, I'm passing it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Neela, for that kind introduction. And so happy to see you all here for this webinar, and I'm delighted to try to share with you some little tips and whatnot for submitting an abstract to the ERN conference. And the information that we'll talk about will also, it's going to be targeted towards ERN, but it's also some very general information about how to just do a good job with writing an abstract. So I will go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Okay, so hopefully it's all looking good. If not, please let me know. Yeah, so just a couple little kind of administrative things I wanted to go over. This webinar is, scheduled for an hour long, and that includes time for questions. So there's plenty of time for questions. So feel free to ask any questions throughout. I will also pause a couple times if you would prefer to do that. You can just, raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask a question, or you could submit in the chat as well. So I won't be able to see either of that, but Neela will be helping out, letting me know if anyone has any questions. But like I say, I'm happy to take them throughout the webinar presentation. So first of all, I want to start by getting to know a little bit about who you are on this webinar. So I'm going to share, I'm going to initiate a poll, and you can go to this URL that I have here, which Neela will also drop in the chat for you. And then I'm going to start asking some questions. And just a little background to let you know that these polls are just intended to give you an anonymous way to interact and just engage and just kind of, provide some information. None of the data in the poll will be shared or stored or anything like that. So it's just kind of a way for us to interact. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the poll. Great, you guys are already on it. So the first question is, what your current status is in terms of your academic status. And it looks like we've got a little more than half are undergraduate students, and we've got some faculty and staff as well. So I'll just give you a second. Hopefully you're finding the poll. As you can see, you can also use your phone to text to join as well, and then, put in your response. So great. Okay, very good. So we've got almost, okay, over there, over 60% are undergrad. It's always fun to watch these real time as they change. So, okay, good. I'm glad you guys are finding the poll and we're getting more responses. So we have some master's students and a lot of undergrads, of some faculty and staff as well. Good, okay. So as you know, the ERN Conference is open to presentations by students who are either undergraduates, masters, or doctoral students. So this is really great because it just kind of helps me to understand, who's out there and what academic status you're at. So I personally am really excited to see a lot of undergrads because it's great. It's a great opportunity for you to, start getting engaged in the scientific professional work, professional societies and the professional environment. So going to a conference and presenting research is a great way to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and advance to the, let's see. advance to my next question, which is, have you ever submitted an abstract to a conference before? So I just kind of, again, trying to gauge, no right or wrong answers here, just trying to understand what your experience level is now. So we've got some who have and some who haven't. And like I say, no right or wrong answers, but just trying to see who's out there and whatnot. I think that will cover things that will be helpful for you either way, whether you have or haven't. I was just kind of curious to know if you have had experience with that. Okay, great. Looks like we're stabilized on our responses now. So most of you have not, but quite a few have also submitted. I think that hopefully you'll be able to pick up some tips here as well to improve if you have. And most importantly, if you're, well, we'll go on to the next question. And that is, are you planning to submit an abstract to the ERN Conference? So that will be kind of a related question. So we know whether you have or haven't. And if you're planning on submitting to ERN, we'll get to know that as well too. So good. All right. So definitely we have quite a few who are, which is great. I'm so happy to hear that. ERN is a really, really wonderful conference. I am lucky to have been involved in it from the very beginning. I think it's over 10 years. It's been a long time. And I know everyone is really excited about it returning next year and in person, which will be wonderful. So good. Okay, so over half of you are planning, some are not, and then not sure. So hopefully today you'll learn enough to help you make a decision. And like I say, I'm hoping that you're going to go, the decision will be go ahead and submit an abstract. It's going to be a great opportunity to get to go to a conference and to share your research. Yeah, so good. All right. All right. Another question is, what are you hoping to get out of this webinar? So this is a free form, was going to develop a word cloud. So feel free to just type in a word or two or a short phrase about what you would like to try to get out of this. Oh, great. Ideas will be a really wonderful thing that hopefully we'll stimulate some ideas for you about how to develop a good abstract. Good. Writing an abstract. Ideas is more a framework. Okay, very good. Lots of people want some ideas, which I'm really happy about. Writing tips, I think, is good. Best practices. Professionalism is very good. How to kind of be a scientific professional is something. This is actually the perfect way to get started on that, because what do scientists do? They go to a conference and they present their results and whatnot. So it's really fabulous. So very good. All right, keep putting in your what you'd like to get out of this. All right, abstract. Yes, hopefully you will be able to write an abstract by the end of this. That's what the goal is, and try to help you figure out how to do that. And we will go through some examples and kind of some step-by-steps of how to approach that. Okay, great. Thank you very much for your input there. So here's a fun one. Who's your favorite scientist, engineer, mathematician, or technologist? I always like to get a little fun in there too, so we can learn about who are the people that, or maybe oh, look at that. Someone got a face. I don't know how you did that. That is fabulous. I love that. Einstein, Albert Einstein. That's wonderful. Okay, so Albert Einstein is still very popular. Stark, Da Vinci, all right. Doudna, Leonardo's up there. I guess that goes with the Da Vinci. Very good. I love this. This is so cool. You guys are very creative. I like this. Okay, all right. Hopper, yay. I like to see Hopper up there too. Grace Hopper is an amazing computer scientist, like the pioneer in computer science. It's really amazing. I see a Marie in there. That's probably a Marie Curie. That's the one problem with this word cloud. It doesn't kind of keep the words together, so they get separated, but that's really cool. So great. Okay, I'm so happy that you shared with us kind of your favorite inspirational scientists, engineers, mathematicians, technologists, and great. And we got someone who is using the tool to write on here as well. Thank you very much. There we go. Isn't this cool? All right. All right, okay, looks like we've got stabilized there on answers, so I will go ahead and go on. I have one more question, and that is just kind of what academic field you're in. So all of these fields here are represented at the AAAS ERN Conference, and I'm always just curious to see what, the breadth of people that come to the conference, which is really exciting. And then, of course, here, I was just curious how many are in which fields. And no matter what field you are, this should be, the information that we cover here should be applicable to all the different fields. Okay, good. So it looks like we have a lot of biological sciences, and then a pretty good spread across almost all the areas. Data science, of course, is a fairly new field, so maybe not a surprise that we don't have people in there, so good. Okay, I'm going to go back to my slides now. That's the end of all of my questions right now. And I'll go back to getting started on the content of the webinar. Great, and like I say, feel free to ask questions throughout if you like. So what I'm going to do is this is just an outline of what I'm planning on talking about today. And so I thought it would be really interesting to talk about why you should even consider doing this. I know some of you are kind of undecided, but why is it a good idea to give a poster or an oral presentation at a conference? And then we're going to spend a fair amount of time going over the abstract guidelines that ERN has put together, as well as the review process. So when you submit an abstract, of course, it's going to be reviewed by a number of different scientists or basically people in your field. And we'll talk about what that review will look like. And so you'll have a sense of what you have to do in order to get accepted, because of course, not everyone is accepted. And then we'll talk about actually preparing your abstract, and then how to kind of go through the development guide and the sample that ERN has provided for all of you. So in terms of why you should give one, maybe hopefully the people who are already planning have a good sense of this. But first of all, what you're doing in STEM and in your classes and whatnot is you're working on research projects. And it's really a great opportunity for you to communicate your excitement for that research, as well as demonstrate your skills and knowledge and abilities. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you go to conferences and present your research, you can learn a lot from other people who come to hear your presentation and ask questions, and also are just interested about your work. And also really important is that you can have an opportunity to learn about opportunities that might come up. So you might find out about other internships or fellowships to apply for and whatnot. Of course, ERN includes a lot of really great content for professional and leadership development. And of course, there's not the reason. Another big reason is also to win prizes and awards, because cash prizes will be awarded at ERN and are typically awarded at other conferences as well. So if you're planning on, writing an abstract for a different conference. So we're going to go over the guidelines for submission, which are available on the ERN website at that link that I have shown here. The slides will be made available afterwards, so you can, get to that link. You could probably also easily find it on the ERN website. But as Neela mentioned, just a big reminder, the abstract deadline is September 16th, Friday, at midnight in Pacific time. And you must submit it through the online system. So you can't send it by mail or fax or anything like that. It has to be done through the online system. So make sure that you do that and don't miss the deadline. In terms of eligibility, basically any student who is currently registered as an undergraduate or graduate student at a U.S. college or university, and also has conducted some research in a STEM field. So it's really two simple things. You have to be at a U.S. academic institution, and you have to have conducted some kind of STEM-related research. So in terms of the schedule of the presentations and the type of presentations, so all the oral and poster presentations are going to be on Friday, February 10th and Saturday, February 11th. So you would be scheduled on either of those days if you're accepted to present. And when you go through the submission process, you can select whether you want to submit a poster or an oral. And so your abstract will be for whatever you enter in there in the system. If you select poster or you select oral, that's what your presentation will be. And for graduate students, the only option is oral, which I think is a really good thing, because the oral presentation will be something that you will be doing more of in the future. And so, so hopefully you've already had some practice doing posters. As an undergraduate, so you have the option of poster or oral. I think some people think the poster is a little bit easier. It's in case you're not, if you haven't been to a conference before, it's where you actually literally create a big physical poster that you stand next to, and you talk to people come up to you during the session, and you talk to them about your poster, which has information about your research. It's a little more informal, and it's also a little less structured than an oral presentation where you have a specific set of times, and typically you go through a PowerPoint presentation or some kind of presentation of your research information that you're trying to share with everyone. So the criteria for your abstract acceptance, and I'm sure you're really interested in this, is that you have to include the following items. You need to have a hypothesis or a statement about the problem that you're trying to investigate, and basically why is this research important. It's the way you motivate people to get interested in your work. You need to also include a discussion of the methods or the controls that you use to conduct your research. You also need to talk about your results and your discussion of findings. So what did you ran an experiment, what were the results, and then what did those results tell you, which kind of leads into the conclusions, as well as the future research that will be conducted and any kind of key references that are related to this. You also always want to make sure you acknowledge the funders, and you will need to get your faculty advisor or mentor approval in this process as well. So to get accepted, if you are accepted, then your abstract will be listed on the ERN Conference app. So it's an app that has all kinds of information about the conference that people will use real time during the conference to go decide which orals to see and which posters to see and whatnot. And then what's really cool is that, so you give your presentation on Thursday or sorry, Friday or Saturday, and then there is cash awards given to the top oral or poster presentations for each STEM category. And the undergraduates and graduates and awards are announced during the closing banquet on Saturday, February 5th, which is a really fun and exciting event. So here are the STEM categories that are included in ERN. They go from biological sciences all through the physical sciences, engineering, and mathematics as well. So any of these, you can submit, work related to any of these fields. And notice that it also includes science and math education, which is a really great thing. So a few more guidelines, and that is that you can only submit one poster or oral abstract for each student. Okay, so you can be listed as a co-author on a second abstract, but you can only submit one as the primary author. And if there are students in the same lab, multiple students, and they all want to submit, and maybe they're working on the same projects, you actually have to each independently submit original abstract. So it can't be just a copy, and it should be really focused on each student's role in that research. So it's the student who's there presenting what they did in the project. If you're, it's only the primary author who presents during the conference. There are no co-presenters allowed at all. Also, you have to get approval from all the co-authors listed on the abstract. And if you don't do that, it will get immediately rejected. And related to that, you also have to get faculty or your research mentor's approval. Again, if you don't get that, it will get rejected. And then they really need to be written by the student, and they should be reviewed by the faculty research mentor, but the student should be writing the abstract. And you should also make sure that your abstracts adhere to the highest quality in terms of grammar, spelling, sentence structure, and whatnot. So be sure to edit and proofread before you submit this. So you might feel like this is kind of a rudimentary thing to say, but I have read a lot of abstracts, and unfortunately we get a lot that don't take care of this. And I know sometimes you get busy, but it's extremely important to make sure you have the correct grammar and so edit and proofread your guidelines as well. So I will pause for just a minute to see if there are any questions or comments about anything we've covered so far. Anything in the chat or?
I was going to say, so far there were no questions that I've seen in the chat so far.
Okay, so I see, it looks like Courtney has raised her hand. You want to ask a question, Courtney?
Good afternoon. So just a quick question. I just want to verify this for some of my students. So if they are working together on a research project, only one of them can submit the abstract, or are they all allowed to submit separate abstracts showcasing what they worked on, but their project, like their poster, could be very similar? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, so yeah, so if you have multiple students working on the same project and they all want to present, then they can each submit a separate abstract, and they each should write those abstracts, and they should talk about their work on the project. So they have to be, it can't be one abstract for all the students. So each student would submit their own abstract and talk about what they did on the project. Correspondingly, you would expect the poster to be, maybe there's some common things across, but each poster would again also focus on what that student did.
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying that for me.
Absolutely, no problem. Any other questions?
I see one in the chat, Marianne.
Okay.
One of our attendees asked, how many words should the abstract have?
Okay, great. We're coming up to that in just a minute. So I don't remember off the top of my head, but I've got it on the slide. I think it's 3,000 words, but we'll absolutely get to that.
Thank you.
Okay, any others? No? Okay, I will go ahead and move forward. Thank you all for those questions. We're here to answer your questions more than anything. I talk all the time, so I'm happy to just hear what you guys are, what questions you have. So in terms of the review process, that's a really important thing because you want to know how you're going to be judged, right? So the way that the criteria that's established for the review is first of all, of course, originality and innovation. So in terms of the work, and then also again making sure that we don't have just duplicates in terms of different students from the same lab. The scientific content, that it's being supported by quantitative information and references, the merit of the research, the quality of the written content, and of course the adherence to the guidelines that I just went over in terms of format. The abstracts are going to be reviewed by a panel of scientists in the appropriate STEM disciplines. So my background is in chemistry, so I review for chemistry. But remember that chemistry is a pretty broad field. There's a lot of different kinds of chemistry. And in my case, I'm a computational chemist. So I know a lot about how to do computational chemistry, but not necessarily a lot about organic chemistry. So you're not guaranteed you're going to get someone who knows your specific area. So I see we have a question from Carrie. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry about that. So I do have a question. We were recipients of the Abstract Acceptance last year and Travel Award. Do we resubmit it? Did I miss it?
Sorry, can you repeat that last part?
Do we have to resubmit, or does our things carry over to the actual conference this year?
Well, Neela, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you have to resubmit every year because we wouldn't really expect you to just come back and do the same thing as last time.
No. We didn't get a chance to present.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's when the conference was canceled.
Yes,
When it was canceled at the last minute. So Carrie, you will be receiving notification. Anyone who received acceptance or travel award will be receiving an updated notification in the coming days to that. Long story short, yes, we'll be asking for anyone who received travel awards to resubmit, but you'll be receiving more information about that. We'll be sending out an email and a MailChimp notice in the coming days about that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great,
And
thanks,
then,
Carrie.
Marianne, there was one additional question that came up at the same time when Carrie was asking her question. Does the abstract need to include references?
Does it need to include what?
References.
Well, in the guidelines, it mentions references. The ERN guidelines mentions references, although I would say on a general basis, references aren't typically included in abstracts. So I don't know, Neela, you would probably be more of an authority on this than I would, if you know for ERN.
I'm sorry, I had a direct message that I was responding to.
Oh, that's okay.
In the chat. I apologize.
So for ERN, do they want people to add references in the abstract?
I don't think they added them directly in the abstract. We can have that clarified and make sure that we update the website to the FAQs to make sure that we clarify that answer for everyone.
So typically what you would do is you would maybe instead of an actual like reference, which, you know, shows a paper, you might refer to other work that's related, that justifies your stuff, but you wouldn't actually have a reference in the abstract. So that's a general answer. And then Neela will look, kind of help and find out the specific answer for ERN. Thank you so much, Neela.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. So we're talking about the review. So then, yeah, so you'll be reviewed. The abstracts will be reviewed by a panel of scientists that are in your general field, but maybe not necessarily your specific subdiscipline. And then they'll look over the criteria that's established in the guidelines to make a decision. And then once the decisions are made, they are final. There's no appeals or anything like that. There is a lot of people who apply to ERN and they support a lot of people. So unfortunately, there just isn't time to try to make any kinds of appeals to decisions. Once you are accepted, the conference staff will go through and group all the abstracts with similar themes into the specific oral or poster sessions, and they will develop a presentation schedule and inform you of that. And once the schedule is set, it's also final and times cannot be changed. So you will be assigned a particular time slot on a particular day for when you will be presenting, and that will be a final schedule. In terms of why you wouldn't get accepted, here's a few reasons. So first of all, basically, if you don't have the required components, so we've already said you have to have a hypothesis or a statement of your problem. And if you don't have one, or it doesn't clearly articulate that, why the research is important, then that would be a reason why you would be rejected. Basically, the abstract is like a snapshot of what you're going to be presenting, and so it's your chance to articulate with people in advance why you should be accepted to present at the conference. And again, if you don't have your methods clearly spelled out in the abstract, you don't have to, of course, you only have limited space, so you don't go in complete detail, but you have to at least have a general statement about what methods you used. You definitely want to include something about your results. And if you don't have any results or the results are unclear or insufficient to support your conclusions, and you have no conclusions, all of these things, basically, you want to then tie back to each other because you're really telling a story, which I'll get to in a little bit as well. So as far as the notifications, you will get notified through email. So make sure when you enter your submission into the system, you make sure you have your current and valid email address for yourself and the faculty members. And then be sure to check your email for notifications. If anything comes up, that's how the AAAS will be communicating with you. If you have any change of email addresses, be sure and let AAAS know. The plan is to have the abstract acceptances emailed out to you by the week of November 7th, so you'll know in plenty of time in advance whether or not you get accepted to present at the conference. Also, a little side note for travel award, the application process is basically part of the registration, part of the submission process as well. So there's a registration type that you enter into the system that says you want to apply for a travel award. The deadline is Friday, September 16th. Midnight, and notifications again will go out in the same week of November 7th.
Marianne, there's a question in the chat that I'd like to just bring up. Ana Gonzalez asked, will the students be given feedback if rejected?
So I actually don't know. Do you know, Neela, if they will be given?
I do, yeah. So they do not receive feedback if the abstract is rejected.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think part of that is because we would have to go through the number of reviewers, go back to them. They would have to go back and try to identify the abstract to see why it wasn't reviewed. And I think that's just too much of a double ask of the reviewers to do that. So therefore, no, unfortunately, we do not provide feedback for rejected abstracts.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely understand that. I'm not surprised. That's pretty typical in conferences to not provide feedback. It just all of the reviewers are volunteers, and so it's a lot of work just to review the applications, or sorry, review the abstracts. And so that unfortunately is not typical for that happen, and it's unfortunate, but you're here and hopefully you're learning some good tips so that your abstract will get accepted. Okay, great. So I'll move on unless there's other questions. We're going to start talking about how to prepare to write your abstract. And there will be 3 topics that I'll talk about. It's just, first of all, it's organizing your ideas, and then telling a story, and then telling a scientific story. So this is something that I think is really important to keep in mind, and it's something that covers what I would consider the most common thing that we see in terms, and we hear from the reviewers that kind of doesn't really happen, and it will really make you stand out. So first of all, when you think about just organizing your ideas and your audience, you want to be, first of all, very clear about who is your audience. So who's going to be at ERN? So we saw earlier that there's a really broad spectrum of STEM areas that are covered by the conference. And so what that means is that someone could come up to you, let's say we had a lot of biological sciences people there. Well, maybe a chemist is going to come up and talk to you, or maybe someone from physics is going to come up and talk to you. The other thing, in terms of, remember what I said about the reviewers of your abstracts. Well, luckily, you're likely, if you're in biology, that there will be someone with a biological background that's reviewing your abstract. But there's just biology within itself. There's so many different areas. There's systems biology, there's proteomics, there's all different kinds of biology, and the chances that you're going to get someone that knows your subdiscipline is actually quite small. So what that means is that you have to be able to think about your audience, which is going to be someone who does not know as much detail about your area of science, who's going to be reading that. So you want to make sure that when you're writing it, that you think about, what do they know, what do they not know. So you can't make assumptions and start jumping right into a lot of technical detail and using a lot of jargon, because people won't really necessarily have that background. And then, of course, you want to organize your abstract. We have in here kind of a very typical way to organize it is going through these topical areas, which, guess what, are the required components of the abstract. And that's for a good reason, because that's what makes a good abstract. If you want to start out by, providing some kind of overview or motivation of why someone should even care about your work, that comes through your hypothesis or your kind of motivation information. And then related to that, typically it's not listed out as a required section, but related to that hypothesis or motivation is the background information. Some people also think of this as kind of your lit review or your literature review. So hopefully when you started on your project, you had to become familiar with what other people are doing in this field and why the work that you're doing is important. And then, of course, you step through your methods, your results, your discussion of what your findings are, what that told you, what kind of conclusions you draw from the research. And then you always want to talk about your future work and, of course, acknowledge the funders of your work. So you don't have to necessarily follow this specific order, but it's a good practice to follow this order. And you can, because it's quite logical, and people will be kind of expecting you to follow an order very similar to this in any case. So in terms of your abstract, And this also applies to when you present after you get your abstract accepted, and that is that you always want to try to tell a story. So it might mean that you need to think about what is your story. Have some conversations with your faculty advisor or your research mentor. What's the story? Where did we begin, and what's that background and our motivation as why, and who was involved in this. Maybe there's a middle part, maybe there were like some twists and turns. Like it's what I've seen is a lot of presentations, which make them really great, is like, oh, well, there's like, we were expecting this, but we found out this. And it was like the twists and turns that happened and whatnot, and kind of what came up during your process, and try to craft a story. And that story that you're going to craft will be articulated in the abstract and then later in your poster or your oral session. And when you talk about telling a scientific story, so last was just kind of telling a story of any kind, and now the thing that you have to think about are, in this case, in science, what happens is you kind of, what we say, you learn more and more about less and less. And what does that mean? You dive deep into a particular area. And so you become more details into a specific research topic and not so general. And what's really important is that you learn how to balance all of those really cool technical things that you learned and researched with actually being able to articulate that in a way that someone who's not as detailed oriented and doesn't understand the research at that level can understand, whether they're still within your same general field or if they're in a very different field. So it is something that is a bit of an art. And if you're able to really get good at this, I tell you, it will pay off in so many ways, because everywhere you go, you're going to have to be telling someone about what you're doing. You're going to have to be asking for money, whether it's money to go to a conference or whether it's money to fund your research. And if you can't communicate really why it's important and exactly what you're doing and what's unique about your approach, you really won't be able to get very far with that at all. So it's a really great thing to spend some time trying to figure out how to do this. So now we're going to kind of walk through a little bit of the abstract guidelines and looking at the very specifics and looking at examples. And this is taken from the materials that are available on the website, so you can also get more, look into the details. But in terms of your title of your abstract, so it cannot be more than 100 characters, and that includes punctuation and spaces. And it should not be a sentence, so it's just more like a phrase. And of course, people like to come up with nice, catchy phrases to catch people's attention, because that is the first opportunity for you to capture someone's attention as to why they should come and listen to your poster or your oral. And then, of course, there's the primary author, and that's the person who will be a presenter. So whoever you list as the primary author, that's the person who's going to be presenting. And then, of course, you just include their name, and then, we've got a title of The Science of Education, Life in the Computer Era. So that's a really nice, catchy title as well. And then when you go through, of course, you have to have the primary author's institution, any co-authors that you want to include that will be listed on the abstract. You're going to have to get their approval of them. And then there's a sample of, the primary author is Jane Doe at Howard University in DC, and then there's other co-authors on there as well. And the co-authors are not going to be presenting, but you're acknowledging people who worked on the project with you and had something to do with your developing your research. The abstract is limited to 3,000 characters, so I did remember it correctly. And that's including your spaces and punctuation, so that's characters. And you want to make sure you absolutely include a hypothesis, why the research is important, your methods and controls, your results, and your conclusions and your future research questions that you want to address. These are all the things that you're going to include in your presentation as well. So we have a sample abstract here, and I'm going to let you read this. I know it's a lot of text, but I want you to read this, and I'm going to ask you we want to go through a little exercise here and see if all the components are in this abstract, and if so, what are they? So the first thing we're going to want to try to identify is the hypothesis. So is there a hypothesis in this? And if so, what is it? If you find it, you could feel free to raise your hand or answer or put it in the chat. And it's a lot of text, so I'll give you a minute to read through it. Okay, David, I see you raised your hand. What do you think?
I believe he mentions one hypothesis by Brandon's rule: body size measurements to the nearest 1.01 millimeters were taken use by digital calipers from 5 populations from high, mid-range with low evaluation in eastern Arizona. So I think he's talking about like his hypothesis is the size of like how to measure sizes of birds, it looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, it's the hypothesis is that there's you know, a relationship with the size, but it's also what they're suggesting is that it's the reverse of this thing called the Bergman's rule, right? So there is the hypothesis is that there should be a reverse size relationship. So Bergman's rules describes a particular relationship in terms of their size and the altitude and with their body temperature. And this hypothesis is basically saying that that rule doesn't apply for these particular kinds of animals, which are the reptiles. Good, great. Thank you, David, for looking through that and finding that. How about why is this important? Anyone can tell why this is important? Okay, David.
I'm just this is referring to the hypotenuse, right?
Yeah, it's related to the hypothesis, exactly.
A hypothesis, my bad. I would say that this is important because you need to give the readers the understanding of what you're trying to research is about and what's the thought process for that research.
Yeah, so actually the why is this important is why is this research important? So in this case, I would say that the research is important because there is a relationship between body size and these exotherms, which are these reptiles, and they're trying to figure out whether or not this well-known rule applies to that, because the rule gives you information about you know, these different animals and how they interact with how they, you know, basically survive at different elevations. I hope I'm not a biologist, so I'm just, you know, seeing what I could extract from this abstract. So what about the methods? What did they do to actually, in this research, what did they actually do? What kind of methods did they use? Can anyone tell what the methods are here? No guesses on the methods? What did they actually do to run this experiment? Or, you know, it's not exactly an experiment. Here we go. I see, Jamie, do you have an idea?
I believe he said he used digital calipers to measure body size from 5 populations,
Uh-huh,
and from high, mid-range, and low elevations in southeastern Arizona. And
exactly.
then they compared them.
Exactly, perfect. That's exactly what they did. They took measurements for different populations at different elevations, and then they compared it. That's exactly what the methods are. Great job. And what about the results? Anyone tell what the results are? Jamie?
So after comparisons, they found that there was a significant size difference between high and low elevation populations,
Mm-hmm.
and the mean body size, snout vent length of individuals at higher elevations were significantly smaller
Right,
than their lower elevations. And so the results indicated an inverse correlation to Bergman's rule.
exactly. That's exactly what they found, is that they found this difference between high and low elevation, but was the opposite of what they were expecting, Bergman's rule. So is that consistent with their hypothesis? In terms of their conclusions, anyone see what their conclusions are? Sierra?
It says these results indicate an inverse correlation to Bergman's rule, and that the rapid thermoregulation in ectotherms achieved by decreased body size and increased surface to volume ratio supports a physiological explanation for this phenomenon.
Exactly. That is exactly the conclusions. And so do you think these conclusions support their hypothesis? Can you tell? No? Anyone remember what the hypothesis was and how these conclusions correlate to that? They came up with an idea of what they thought they would find. That's the hypothesis. And then they did some methods, and then they found some results. David.
Yes, if I remember correctly, it was they wanted for the Bergman rule, they wanted to see if there was a correlation between that and the elevations and
Right. And whether it was basically
yeah, that and I believe that there was they wanted to see if it was still applicable to that, or there was a differences for what the Bergman rule stated, if I remember correctly.
right. They wanted their hypothesis was that it was what they would find would be the opposite of the Bergman's rule. Sierra, what do you think?
Sorry, wouldn't let me unmute. From what I can gather, their hypothesis was correct.
Yeah, absolutely. They thought there would be an inverse relationship And that's exactly what they found. So their conclusions was basically that they were right, which is kind of nice. Very good. So then they also, I know we're almost out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and go on the future research. So they talk about trying to, look at the interaction of factors such as sexual selection and how that, impacts this in terms of the males and the females, and why the ectotherms don't follow the inverse of the Bergman rules. So the ectotherms are the reptiles versus the mammals, which was what the Bergman rule applies to. And here they're saying, well, now the next thing to do is figure out why this is true. Why does this rule not apply to the reptiles? So, I'll just kind of go quickly through the other things, because I know we're about out of time. You, of course, want to go through and acknowledge the funders and get your approvals and whatnot. So in summary, what we tried to cover is that be sure to be familiar with the guidelines and include all of the sections in your abstract that are outlined there, not just because they're in the guidelines, but because it's really good practice when writing an abstract. And be sure to try to figure out how to tell a really understandable story to your target audience, which, remember, means that you probably have to be more general and whatnot. And of course, use the proper grammar and punctuation of terms. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my sharing and turn it back over to Neela.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marianne. I had one question that I wanted to make sure that was asked earlier on that we did not get to, and that was how far back should the research be to be included in the abstract? How far back could the research go?
How far back, meaning like, was it a research from
is it in the past 5 years? What would be, how far should the research be in order to apply, was the question.
Yeah, so typically when you're presenting your research at a conference, it's relatively recent, within the last year or two. And if you're trying to present something from 5 years ago that's hopefully already been published, it's usually potentially less likely to get it accepted. So the whole idea about going to conferences is to try to present recent work.
Thank you for answering that, Marianne.
That's a great question. I'll actually answer that. So for the ERN conference specifically, we definitely want that to be research that you recently conducted. It could be the summer before, or if you were a 2022 travel awardee and your abstract was accepted, it's okay to present that research that you had planned to present this year at the conference, but typically it would be definitely very recent, and it could go back to the summer before. That's specifically for the ERN conference, but what Marianne said definitely apply for any other conference. So that was a great question.
Thanks,
Thank
Iris.
you. And everyone, welcome Iris. She was able to join us for the webinar. Thank you once again, Marianne. I want to close this webinar with just a few thoughts. I just put in the chat our post-webinar survey. We would greatly appreciate if you all could complete that. We'll be sending an email following this webinar as well to have you complete that post-survey. For more information on the ERN conference, you can visit our website that's listed here, emerging-researchers.org. Please follow us on social media. We have a Twitter and LinkedIn page. And just a reminder to please, if you are submitting an abstract, to please remember to submit by the deadline, September 16th, 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. All of that information will be shared with you all. Once again, it is in the chat earlier. I can drop it one more time so that you have the link to submit a travel award, to submit an abstract and apply for a travel award for the ERN conference. Please make sure you get that in by the deadline. We want to be mindful of time. There was one more question from Jamie Marianne. She says, what about writing an abstract for research that was not very experiment-based?
Oh, that's absolutely, well, I'm not sure what you mean by experiment-based, Jamie, but if you mean it was like theoretical or computational or something like that, then absolutely you can definitely include that area, because there's lots of different ways to do scientific research other than running experiments.
Well, Mary Ann, thank you so much for your presentation. This is being recorded, so we'll be sharing this with all of the attendees. Attendees, thank you all so much for being engaging during this presentation, for participating in the polls, answering the questions that Mary Ann provided. And please be on the lookout for the follow-up email for the post survey and as we share our recording. Good luck to everyone who's submitting a ERN Conference abstract, and hopefully we see you all in February. I was going to say September, but it's September. Hope to see you all in February of next year.
Good
Take
luck,
care.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.